Need a couple of belts? All right, let's do it. All right, y'all. So I got a call for two belts, one for work and one for dress. The work belt will be 1.5 inch in brown with brass hardware, and the dress belt will be a cordovan, also with brass. Got all the parts that I needed, I was missing, and then started pre-punching out all the parts. So the first thing I'm going to use is that's a 40 millimeter round end on the back side where the that tab will flip underneath the buckle. And it's going to be hidden so it doesn't have to necessarily match anything. And I'll use an English point on the front, on the tip. You know, with these being two different dimensions, 1 3/8 for the dress belt, 1.5 inch for the work belt, you'd think you'd have to accommodate that in the size of the punches. But I use 40 millimeter for both. And then when I asked the cat what size belt he wore, instead of asking for a pant size, because that's not a true accurate measurement, I'm like, measure from the end of the buckle to the hole that you most frequently use. And he came up with a dimension of 36. When I did mine, I came up to a 41, but my pant size is a 38. So, yes, I am a fatty, but also you can see where there's a drastic difference between the size of your pants versus the size of your belt. So I'll get all the holes marked out ahead of time, and then I just put a real light dimple in it so I can kind of see. I space those 1 inch apart, set the middle hole at 36, and then go 3 on each side, plus or minus, for a little bit of growth or shrink. And then I'll have a template for both those. I'll get them centered up, and once they're aligned, then I'll punch the holes out. All right, end punch to get a nice belt tip point. What's cool about punching instead of cutting is that it compresses the fibers on the end, so you get a lot of longevity out of that. Like I'll try and burnish it, but I find that most times it's already smooth enough that the fibers are pushed together from that punching. And granted, I should be more diligent about sharpening my tools, but in this case, it really does help me out. It's more like using uh, like a 3-ton press or something to knock it out. Okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to punch out those holes that I marked. I'm just using the standard rivet punch. And I find that for the most of the buckles that I was using, that was fine. In this case, test it out because I'm crazy about making sure it's going to work before I wreck an actual workpiece. Oh, lo and behold, look at that. It does not fit through that hole. Not easily, anyway. So, with a little bit of force and stretching, you could make it fit, but nobody wants to do that. They want to put their belt on and go to work. So, I'm going to upsize the punch to the one that I use for the buttons for snaps. It's a bit of a wider stem, and then we'll give that a test. I think that one's going to work. You can pick on me for my hold if you want to, but you'll notice that my couple back fingers there, they're holding over the port that lets all the little divots out. And if you want to keep those from rolling all around the floor, to step on one, give yourself an ankle injury, a la Keystone Cop. If you put your finger over the backside as you're beating these things out, it kind of collects them in there. And if you keep yours cleaned out, it's not going to create any kind of a backup or anything. I'll release those as soon as I'm done, and drop them off in my little cup there. But it it prevents that stuff from rolling everywhere. Ah, there goes one. All right, time for some marking some more holes for some hardware fitment. When I do this, I'm eyeballing a lot of it just based on the kind of from doing it once or twice before. I know sort of where things are going to fly. But fold over the back and mark yourself some holes. Don't worry about giving yourself some extra room to play with, as long as you bake that into your measurements so you don't short sheet the belt. On this cordovan belt, it came out pretty easily because I had it's kind of a thinner brass, being a little more fancy. So I just went through my own hole to just mark some spots, and then I opened it up and finished them off. If you punch through two leathers of this 10 ounce or 12 ounce, you're going to get sticky. I got a 3/4 inch oblong hole punch that I'm going to use to make the slot for the belt pin, and I just line it up in the center of the belt and in between those two rivet holes. All right, bevel until you want to throw up. I'm using a number 2 on this because I want to give it a little bit of a center profile. And of course, the rough side's gonna just wreak havoc on that blade. So you may wind up doing a long length like this. You might do one belt, then resharpen, and then go back and do the other one. All right, that finished it off, and then because we did it on both sides, that makes for a nice, easy burnish when time comes. If you use two different sizes, you wind up getting an offset edge line. That's no good. All right, I'm hand dyeing these instead of spraying them, because when I tested, the guy was pretty particular about his color, so I wanted to make sure I got him exactly what the image was that I sent him ahead of time, and I could only replicate that by hand dyeing it. Not something I normally do these days anymore because, wow, what a pain in the butt. Since I went to the spray rig, I just haven't looked back. I only do this when I have to. So get the top side done first, then clean up your edges, because if you do it the other way around, you'll wind up with splotches where you get overrun from the edges, and those will show darker. And then when I finish this, when I did my own belt, I left my backside unfinished. But for this, especially with it being a darker color, it's gonna show like ignorant if you don't coat it a little bit. So I put a real light brush over it. I didn't saturate it, just colored it enough of the white that it didn't look like a bright shining star in case the backside of your belt showed it all. Yeah, you can see it's just a real light brushing across the top. I just want to give the impression of a color rather than soaking the whole thing, because this is, unfortunately, I don't have, for custom colors and stuff, I don't have any of the professional dyes that are oil based. So these are alcohol based. They're going to dry this stuff up and it'll crack when you start working some of these tight corners. So they're all going to have to be oiled up as soon as I'm done. And the less dye you can get away with, the better off you are. We're going to smear the backside with some tokenol, which I normally reserve for edge burnishing. However, because I don't want purple fluff coming off on this guy's pants, I will Resolene these when the job's done. But in the interim, I want to smooth out that backside. So a little bit of tokenol, and then my guitar slide, and work it down. You burnish that with glass, and it, I'll tell you what, the back sometimes comes out looking every bit as smooth as the front side. Free Home Health Club membership, no gym required. You have forearms like Popeye. And my God, if you don't need a shoulder massage when that's done, you're not human. Yeah, I don't have a perfectly cylindrical glass, so I'm working my front and back angles to make sure I'm smoothing both sides evenly. All right, now the back side's all smoothed out. I'm going to hit my edges, tokenol on those, and then we'll hardwood them. With this long length, I really wanted to put it on a machine, but it just doesn't give me the compression that I'm looking for, especially on something that's going to be high use like a belt, in and outside of belt loops all the time, constantly taking abuse. It really has to be done the long, hard way. Because that tokenol has to be the right consistency, just the proper tackiness. I only do 8-10 inches at a time, just to make sure it remains workable. If you do all the way down one side, by the time you get to the end, it'll start drying out too much. All right, so I got that skinny belt done. Time to do the big workhorse belt, and I ran into a problem. Because this is a thicker belt buckle, it takes up more dimensional space, and I have to run a longer rivet through there in order to accommodate for the extra space. And lo and behold, negative, denied. The long rivet is not long enough. So one of two options: you can either try and drive a pin and washer through there and peen it over, or I'm gonna make one of these a decorative, just go through the top layer with a small rivet, and then I'll punch a hole a little farther down and then I'll actually have a 3-hole set. We'll make it a decorative element. For keepers, remember you got to go over 2 layers. It's going to go in between them, but you're going to bring your belt back around and through it, so it has to be 2 layers wide. So conveniently, if you fold that thing over right by the buckle, you have 2 layers. So just make sure you line it up, mark it, cut it, and then you just have, it's just 2 pinholes in the end. I use a 3/8 because if I use my smaller pricking iron, it'll match the dimension, and then I just do a cross stitch, double up on each end, cross over once in the middle, and it's enough to hold it together. You got a good fit, you can go ahead and rivet in between. You can slip that in between the 2 rivets and hold it in place. Other than that, it free floats about 1.5 inches in either direction. It's all aesthetics, but if you bang on a flat surface, you get flats on both sides. If you want more of a domed profile, use the rivet tool. And there you have it, brown and a cordovan. If you guys have any questions, let me know.